Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me. I should have stayed home. I should have stayed home and let her go have her fun with her colleagues, like I always did. But no, I had to go. I had to be supportive. Looking back, I don't even know what possessed me to go to this barbecue in the first place. Maybe I was bored. Maybe I wanted to prove I could be social. Or maybe there was a part of me that thought I could show her that I could fit in. I was wrong. It was just a barbecue. What could possibly go wrong at a casual work gathering, right? That's what I kept telling myself as I stood in the backyard, drink in hand, scanning the crowd. My wife, Lila, had been talking about this event for weeks, the big office barbecue. She'd mentioned a few of the people she worked with, but honestly, I never paid much attention. Work was her thing, and I respected that. But as I looked around, I realized I didn't know anyone here. Lila was a natural when it came to this sort of thing. People gravitated toward her, men, women, it didn't matter. She had this way about her, this easygoing charm that made everyone feel like they were her best friend. It's part of why I married her. She made me feel like I was the only person in the room, and everyone else saw that too. But that day I saw something different. It started when I noticed him. I didn't know his name at first. I didn't need to know his name. He was one of Lila's co-workers, tall, dark-haired, with that overly confident air about him. The type of guy who walked into a room and thought he was the most important person there. I could tell right away that he had his eyes on her. It wasn't like the others who were chatting casually. No, this guy was lingering around her like a predator circling his prey. At first, I thought it was just me being paranoid. Maybe I was imagining things. But then I saw it. The way he smiled a little too long when he looked at her. The way he kept standing a little too close. I tried to shake it off. It's just a barbecue, right? It's just some guy talking to my wife. But then I overheard something that made my blood run cold. They were talking, laughing, and I was standing near the grill, pretending to care about the ribs someone was cooking, when I caught a snippet of their conversation. Yeah, you know, this guy said. And I'm going to call him Luke for the sake of clarity. I think you're probably the most fun person in the office. It's too bad you're married. You could be a real catch. Lila laughed, but the laugh didn't sound quite right. It wasn't the genuine, carefree laugh I was used to. It was forced, awkward, like she was trying to let it slide but didn't quite know how to. I couldn't believe it. This guy, Luke, just said that to her. Out loud. And she didn't say anything? Didn't call him out? The wheels in my head started turning. Maybe I was being overly sensitive. Maybe I was just reading too much into it. I had to stop myself from jumping to conclusions. But then, it happened again. I was chatting with a couple of guys I barely knew when I saw Luke and Lila again, standing side by side, this time by the drinks table. He leaned in a little too close to her, his hand brushing her shoulder in a way that didn't seem like an accident. She flinched, but I noticed she didn't move away. She didn't tell him to back off. And that's when something inside me snapped. I didn't care anymore if it was just a harmless conversation. I didn't care if I was being paranoid or insecure. What mattered was the look on her face. The way she was standing there, letting him invade her space. And suddenly, I wasn't just some guy at a barbecue. I was her husband, and I was watching someone else get too close. I'd had enough. I walked over to where they were standing. I wasn't trying to be subtle. I wasn't trying to make it seem like everything was okay. No, I was going to confront this head on. Hey, Luke, I said, cutting into their conversation. He turned to me with that cocky grin, like he knew something I didn't. Hey man, you guys having a good time? He said, trying to sound casual, but I could tell the tone was off. Yeah, we're having a great time, I said, glancing at Lila, who was now visibly uncomfortable. She didn't meet my eyes. But I think it's time you backed off. You're getting a little too close for comfort. Luke's grin faltered for just a second. He was taken aback, not expecting me to step in like this. What are you talking about? He said, trying to brush it off. We were just talking, man. I wasn't having any of it. I don't care if you were just talking. But when you start making comments about my wife being a catch, that crosses a line. I could feel my heart racing now, the adrenaline kicking in. So, let's make this clear. She's married, and she's not available. So back off. Luke looked around at the people nearby who had started to gather around us, sensing the tension. He opened his mouth like he was going to say something, but then just closed it again, realizing I wasn't backing down. After a few seconds of awkward silence, he muttered something under his breath and walked off. I stood there for a moment, my chest heaving as I tried to control my anger. Lila was silent. She didn't say a word at first. She just stood there, her hands wrapped around her drink, looking at the ground. I didn't think you'd say something like that, she finally said, her voice low, almost apologetic. I didn't know what to say. Did I go too far? Should I have let it slide? But then I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the unease in her eyes. It wasn't about me confronting Luke. It was about the fact that she hadn't done anything to shut him down herself. I wasn't mad at her. I was mad at the situation. Mad that this guy thought he could just waltz in and flirt with her, like I wasn't even in the picture. And mad that she hadn't put him in his place. I'm not trying to make a scene, I said finally. But I'm not going to let anyone disrespect you. She nodded slowly, but the guilt in her eyes didn't go unnoticed. I wasn't sure what was going to happen after that. The rest of the barbecue was awkward, to say the least. People kept looking at us, whispering, but we didn't speak much after that. I didn't know what she was thinking, but I knew that something had shifted between us. The ride home was quiet. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. The way he looked at her, the way she didn't immediately shut him down, and how things had gotten so out of hand so quickly. But the worst part? I still didn't know if I could trust her the way I used to. The drive home was quiet, but the tension was thick. Lila had barely spoken since I confronted Luke. The weight of the whole situation hung between us, thick and suffocating. I could feel her eyes on me, glancing quickly from time to time, as if waiting for me to say something. But I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to process what had just happened. My stomach churned as I replayed the scene in my mind. Luke's smirk, his hand brushing against her arm, the way he casually talked about her being a catch. It felt like a betrayal, even though she hadn't done anything overtly wrong. But then again, wasn't her silence just as bad? I could tell she was trying to figure out how to address it, but the words never came. When we finally pulled into the driveway, she sighed and sat there for a moment, still clutching her drink, looking out the window. "Cole," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for things to get so awkward." I didn't know what to say to that. She sounded so apologetic, but it didn't feel right. I wasn't upset with her. I was upset with the situation. "It's not about being sorry, Lila," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's about respect. You didn't say anything to him. You just let him do whatever he wanted. You didn't put him in his place." Her face fell at my words. She knew I wasn't the jealous type. I never had been. But this was different. This wasn't about jealousy. It was about boundaries being crossed and not even acknowledging it. "I didn't know how to handle it," she said quietly, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "I didn't want to make things weird with my coworkers. It's complicated, Cole. You know how it is at work. He's the type who likes to push boundaries, and I didn't want to make a scene." I didn't know how to respond. I understood her point. She didn't want to make things uncomfortable, but at the same time, what about me? What about us? I thought I'd been clear that I wouldn't tolerate disrespect like that. "I get it," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, even though I was boiling inside. "But I don't care about your coworkers. I care about you. And when someone thinks they can flirt with you like that, it doesn't just hurt my pride, it hurts our relationship." Lila turned to look at me, her expression softening. "I know, and I appreciate you standing up for me. I really do. But I didn't mean for you to feel this way. It was just a casual conversation." But it wasn't just a casual conversation. It was more than that. It was a game, and Luke was playing it, testing how far he could go, seeing how much he could get away with. The worst part? I had no idea how far it would go if I hadn't stepped in. "I know you didn't," I said, trying to collect my thoughts. But it didn't feel casual. Not to me. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the weight of the night pressing down on us. I couldn't stop thinking about how close she and Luke had been standing, how easily he'd invaded her space, how much she'd seemed to let it slide. I wanted to believe her when she said it was nothing, that it was all harmless, but a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something more had been happening behind the scenes. Finally, Lila broke the silence. "I should have handled it differently," she said, her voice tinged with regret. "But I didn't want to make a scene. I should have told him to back off." "I don't care if you make a scene," I said, my voice firm. "I care that you let him get too close. I care that you didn't say something, anything, to make it clear that you're off limits." She sighed, clearly torn. "I know, and I'm sorry, but I don't want you to think that I don't care about you." It wasn't about that. I knew she cared, but this was about trust, boundaries, and respect. I wasn't going to just let anyone think they could get away with disrespecting our relationship, especially someone who worked closely with her. Luke had to know there were consequences for crossing that line. We need to talk about this, I said, my mind still racing. This is bigger than just one incident. I need to know that if something like this happens again, you'll have my back. You'll make it clear that I'm your husband, and no one can step into that space without consequences. Lila looked at me, her eyes filled with sincerity. I promise. Next time, I won't let it slide. I'll make sure they know where I stand. But even as she said that, I could tell she was still processing everything. There was a part of her that wasn't fully convinced, a part of her that still wasn't sure where the line was. I'm not trying to control you, Lila, I said, my voice softer now. I just need to know you're with me on this. You and me, we're a team, and I won't stand by and let anyone make a fool of us. She nodded slowly, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Something had shifted in me that night, something I couldn't easily forget. And I knew that the next time something like this happened, it wouldn't just be about one guy pushing his luck. It would be about how much we trusted each other to handle it when things got complicated. We sat there for a few more moments, both lost in our thoughts. I could see she was trying to figure out what the next step was, but I already knew. The next step would be making sure that boundaries were clear and that there was no room for anyone, especially a coworker, to test the waters. But deep down, I also knew that the damage wasn't fully healed. Not yet. The days after the barbecue were tense, to say the least. Lila and I barely spoke about what had happened. We tried to move on like it was no big deal, but the unspoken words were louder than anything we said. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't just about Luke. It was about the way Lila had handled it, or rather, the way she hadn't handled it. She kept apologizing, telling me she didn't mean to make me feel uncomfortable, but I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach. Something wasn't right. A week passed, and we were back to our usual routine. Lila was at work, and I was at home, trying to focus on my own tasks. But every time my phone buzzed with a message, I couldn't help but wonder if it was from Luke. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid, but then I'd remember that night, the way he'd looked at her, the way she'd smiled, and how everything had seemed too casual. That's when I started to notice little things. Lila was always glued to her phone when she got home, responding to messages from work with a quickness I hadn't seen before. I'd never been the type to check her phone. Trust was important to me, but I couldn't help but feel like something was off. She'd leave the room to take a call, usually from work, but sometimes I'd catch her smiling a little too brightly or laughing a little too much. I tried to ignore it, but the doubt kept creeping in. The next week, Lila invited me to another work event. Another casual get-together. This time, I wasn't sure I wanted to go. The idea of seeing Luke again made my blood boil, but Lila promised it wouldn't be the same. It's just a team-building thing, she said. You should come. It'll be fine. I hesitated, but in the end, I went. I was hoping that maybe I'd just been overreacting, that maybe everything was as innocent as Lila had claimed. But as soon as we arrived, I saw him. Luke. He was standing with a group of people, and the second he saw Lila, his eyes lit up. I felt a rush of heat surge through me. The way he looked at her, like she was the only person in the room, made my stomach twist. Lila, as usual, was friendly, laughing at whatever he said. She seemed so natural, so at ease with him. It made me feel like an outsider, as if I wasn't even there. I tried to shake it off, reminding myself that I was being irrational. I didn't want to be the jealous husband who made a scene. But the more I watched them, the more I realized I couldn't let this go on. Not again. I excused myself to grab a drink, needing a moment to clear my head. But as I was standing by the bar, I overheard Luke talking to one of the other guys. Yeah, Lila is something else, he said, his voice low but loud enough for me to hear. She's got this energy about her. I don't know if she knows it, but she's magnetic. The way he said it made my blood run cold. It wasn't just a compliment, it was an invitation. He wasn't talking about her as a coworker. He was talking about her as a target. I could feel my hands trembling around my glass, my thoughts racing. I had to do something. I wasn't going to let him get away with it again. I glanced back over at Lila, who was standing near him, laughing at something he'd said. My gut told me that she wasn't aware of the undercurrent of flirtation he was throwing her way. She was just being friendly, like always. But I didn't know if I could keep pretending I didn't see it. I walked over to them. My heart pounded in my chest, but I kept my face calm. As I approached, I caught the end of their conversation. She's definitely the most interesting woman in the office. Too bad she's married, Luke said, grinning at Lila like they were sharing a private joke. Lila looked at me, her smile faltering just slightly when she saw the look on my face. I didn't wait. I stepped in between them, my voice steady but firm. You've got about 2 seconds to back off, Luke. His grin faltered for just a second before he plastered it back on, trying to play it off. Cole, come on, man. I'm just giving her a compliment. I wasn't buying it. No, you're not. You're flirting with my wife, and I'm not okay with it. Lila took a step back, her face a mixture of confusion and guilt. Cole, don't, she started, but I wasn't having it. Don't what? I shot back, turning to her for a split second. Let him make it seem like everything's fine? Like it's okay to make her feel uncomfortable? No. Luke looked around, his smile tightening. The room had gone silent, everyone clearly aware of what was happening. But I didn't care. This needed to be addressed. I needed him to know his place. He huffed, clearly frustrated now. All right, man. Whatever, he said, backing away. I didn't mean to make things weird. It wasn't just about making things weird, though. It was about setting boundaries. About showing him that he couldn't get away with crossing them, no matter how charming he thought he was. Lila stood there, stunned, as Luke walked off. I could see the wheels turning in her head, but she didn't say anything right away. The silence between us was deafening. She finally spoke, her voice trembling. Cole, why are you doing this? I don't want this to be an issue between us. I don't want you to feel like you can't trust me. I wanted to say I trusted her. I wanted to tell her it wasn't her I was worried about. But the truth was, I didn't know who to trust anymore, not when it came to Luke. Not when it felt like he was always lingering in the background, trying to push my buttons, trying to see what he could get away with. I'm doing this because I need you to have my back, I said, my voice softening. I need you to make it clear to him that you're off limits. That we're off limits. She nodded slowly, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Regret, maybe? I will. I promise. But as I looked at her, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of it. It couldn't be. The following days felt like a slow burn. Things between Lila and me were fine, but the tension between us was undeniable. She was trying hard to convince me that nothing had happened, that I was overreacting. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it than just a few friendly conversations. Every time her phone buzzed or she mentioned someone from work, I couldn't stop the thought that maybe, just maybe, there was something going on behind the scenes that I wasn't seeing. Then, it happened again. Lila had just finished her shift and was getting ready to go out for drinks with some of her coworkers. She'd asked if I wanted to join, but I could tell she was hoping I'd decline. It had become a pattern. Her work events were becoming more frequent, and I was starting to feel like an outsider. Still, I didn't want to seem controlling, so I agreed to go, though I didn't have a good feeling about it. As soon as we arrived at the bar, I saw him, Luke. Of course. He was already there, surrounded by a few people from the office. As soon as he saw Lila, his face lit up. He waved her over like they were the best of friends. I could feel the knot in my stomach tighten, but I tried to keep my cool. Lila went over to him, and they immediately began talking. I grabbed a drink, feeling like a ghost in the room. I wasn't part of their world, this office dynamic where everyone was so friendly, so close. It wasn't the first time I'd felt like an outsider, but now, with Luke standing there, making it obvious that he was interested in her, it felt different. I tried to focus on my drink, but I couldn't help myself. My eyes kept drifting back to Lila and Luke. They were laughing, too close, just like at the barbecue. He was leaning in, talking to her in a way that felt intimate. There was a moment when their hands brushed, and I saw the flicker in Lila's eyes. She didn't pull away, and I could feel my blood boil. I told myself I was imagining things. But the truth was, it felt like déjà vu, and it was driving me crazy. I walked over, determined to address it. As I approached, Luke gave me one of those smug, I'm in control grins. Hey Cole, he said, his tone too casual, like he was inviting me into their little circle. Lila looked between us, her expression uncertain. She could feel the shift in the air. What's up, Cole? She asked, trying to sound nonchalant. But there was something in her voice that betrayed her unease. I looked Luke square in the eyes. I think we need to talk. Luke raised an eyebrow. About what? You and Lila, I said, my voice steady, though I could feel my hands tightening around my drink. I don't appreciate the way you're making her feel. Lila's face went pale. She opened her mouth to say something, but I held up my hand to stop her. This wasn't about her right now. This was about Luke and his behavior. Cole, you're overreacting, Luke said, but his smile faltered. He wasn't used to being challenged. No, I'm not, I said, my voice firm now. I've seen the way you look at her, the way you keep pushing her boundaries. And it stops now. Lila looked from one of us to the other, her expression a mix of confusion and discomfort. Guys, stop. This isn't helping, she said, her voice trembling. I turned to her briefly, my heart softening. Lila, I'm doing this because I care. Because no one is going to treat you like you're some prize to be won. Luke took a step back, his cocky grin finally fading. The crowd around us had gone silent. I didn't care if anyone was watching. This had to be dealt with, and it had to be dealt with now. You've made your point, man, Luke said, his voice losing some of its edge. He turned to Lila, giving her a look that was almost pitying. It's all good, Lila. I didn't mean to make things weird. But the damage had been done. I could feel my anger simmering, but I took a deep breath. I needed to keep my cool. I wasn't going to let this guy ruin the night. And more importantly, I wasn't going to let him think he could get away with it. Yeah, it is, I said, my voice cold. Now stay away from my wife. As I turned to leave, I could feel the eyes of the crowd on me. I didn't care. I didn't care about what anyone else thought. What mattered was that Lila knew I wasn't going to let anyone disrespect her. Not now, not ever. The night was silent as we drove home. Lila didn't say a word, and I wasn't sure I wanted to hear what she had to say. There was so much running through my mind, and my thoughts were scattered. I tried to stay calm, but I could feel my chest tightening. I had confronted Luke, but it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about us, about trust, boundaries, and how much we were willing to tolerate before it all fell apart. When we got home, Lila sat down on the couch, her hands clasped in her lap. I stood by the door, still trying to process everything. Cole, she started, but her voice trailed off. She was hesitating, like she didn't know where to begin. I didn't want to snap at her, but I couldn't hold it in anymore. Why did you let him get that close, Lila? Why didn't you stop it? She winced at my words. I knew I was being harsh, but the hurt was too much. I didn't think it was that serious, she replied, her voice quiet. I didn't think he was really crossing a line. You didn't think it was serious? I repeated, my voice rising. Lila, he was flirting with you right in front of me. And you? I stopped myself before I said anything I would regret. You didn't even try to shut it down. She looked away, her eyes glossy as she seemed to gather her thoughts. I'm sorry, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want to make things worse. I thought if I just went along with it, it would blow over. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. It's not just about him, Lila. It's about us. About respect. If you don't stand up for me, then how can I stand by you? Her eyes flickered with something. Guilt, maybe, or regret. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just didn't know how to handle it. I've never had anyone make me feel that way before. The words hit me harder than I expected. I had known she was friendly at work, but I never thought that anyone would push her in that way. I just need to know that you'll have my back. I need to know that if something like this happens again, you won't just stand there, letting someone else think they can have you. She nodded slowly, tears welling up in her eyes. I will, Cole. I swear. I never meant for it to look like I was encouraging him. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But there was a part of me that wondered if I could ever really trust her around him again. The way he looked at her, the way he made it clear he thought she was fair game, it made me question everything. I can't keep feeling like this, I said, my voice softer now. Like I'm losing control of things I can't even see. Lila wiped her eyes, her voice trembling. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Cole. I never wanted to make you feel like this. But I wasn't sure she fully understood what I was going through. It wasn't just about Luke. It was about something deeper. It was about feeling powerless, like I couldn't protect my wife from someone who was testing boundaries. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence fill the room. My mind raced, and I realized something important. This wasn't just a one-time incident. This was a pattern. The way Lila looked at me now wasn't just guilt. It was uncertainty. And as much as I wanted to believe her, a small voice in the back of my head kept asking, what if this happened again? What if it wasn't just Luke, but someone else? I needed to know where we stood. The next few days felt like we were walking on eggshells. Lila tried her best to act normal, but I could feel the strain in everything she did. I could see her glancing at me, waiting for me to say something, to let go of the tension between us, but I didn't know how. I kept thinking about the way she reacted to Luke, how she didn't immediately shut him down. I wanted to trust her, but the truth was, I didn't know if I could anymore. We didn't talk much about that night. She'd apologized again, of course, but it didn't feel like enough. I wasn't sure what I needed from her, but it sure wasn't just an apology. I needed to know I wasn't the only one invested in protecting what we had. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Every time her phone buzzed, I'd glance over, wondering if it was Luke trying to reach out again. I hated myself for thinking like this. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who couldn't trust his wife. But I couldn't help it. The way Luke had come on to her so blatantly, the way she'd stood there and let him get away with it. I couldn't forget that. A week passed, and we were invited to another work event, but this time I felt a knot in my stomach. I knew Luke would be there. I could already picture his smug face, waiting for an opportunity to get too close to Lila again. But she insisted. Come on, it'll be fine. It's just a casual dinner this time. We'll be with the whole team. I agreed, even though every part of me wanted to stay home. I couldn't stop thinking about the way Luke had treated her. I couldn't let it go. We walked into the venue, and I immediately spotted him, Luke. He was talking to a group of people, laughing, being the center of attention as usual. I could feel my pulse quicken, but I tried to keep my cool. Lila, as always, was greeted by a few coworkers who immediately pulled her into conversation. It was like she belonged in that world, and I was just the outsider. But then, Luke saw her. His eyes locked onto her, and a smile spread across his face. I watched as he excused himself from the group and made a beeline for her, his steps purposeful, like he was hunting. I stood there, watching them interact, my stomach turning. Lila was smiling, listening to whatever he was saying, and I could tell she was trying to be polite. But then, I saw it. The way Luke's hand brushed against hers, the way he leaned in just a little too close as he spoke. My blood boiled. I couldn't stay silent. I walked over to them, feeling every muscle in my body tense with the urge to confront him. As I approached, Luke saw me coming and smirked, as if he had been expecting this moment. Hey Cole, he said, his voice overly casual. Good to see you, man. How's everything going? I could hear the underlying tone in his voice. He wasn't trying to be friendly. He was testing me, seeing how far he could push. I kept my voice steady. It's fine, but I think you need to step away from my wife. Lila looked at me, her eyes wide, but I didn't care. I had to make it clear. Luke raised an eyebrow, feigning innocence. What's the problem? We were just talking. No, I said, cutting him off. You're crossing the line. I don't care if you're joking or not, but you need to back off. Lila glanced between the two of us, her face a mixture of shock and embarrassment. Cole, please, she started, but I wasn't done. No, Lila, I said, turning to her. I'm not going to let him push his boundaries with you anymore. Luke smirked, clearly annoyed now. All right, man. I get it. No need to get all worked up. It's no big deal. But I wasn't buying it. No, it's a big deal, I said, my voice firm. You think you can just waltz in and make her feel like she's available? That's not how this works. For a moment, there was silence. The room seemed to freeze. Lila was still standing there, her face pale, not knowing whether to intervene or stay silent. Finally, Luke muttered, fine, whatever, and backed off, disappearing into the crowd. But I could feel the damage had been done. It wasn't just about Luke anymore. It was about how Lila was handling it. I didn't care if she was polite. I didn't care if she was trying to avoid confrontation. If this was going to keep happening, we were going to have serious problems. As I turned back to Lila, I saw the guilt in her eyes. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there looking at me. Finally, she spoke. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to make it worse, she said, her voice small. But I can't keep avoiding things. I know I should have stopped him, but I didn't know how. I just need you to stand up for us, I said, my voice softer now. I need you to make it clear that we're a team, that no one gets to test those boundaries. She nodded, her face flushed with embarrassment. I will, Cole. I promise. But even as she said it, I knew something had changed. I didn't know if I could ever fully trust her around him again. The way she had let it slide twice now, it lingered in the back of my mind. And the worst part? I didn't know if I could ever let go of the doubt. After that night, things didn't improve as much as I'd hoped. Lila kept apologizing, but the words felt hollow, like she was just saying what she thought I needed to hear. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that it was just one guy, one situation, and that it shouldn't tear us apart. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something. This wasn't just about Luke anymore. It was about the trust between us. We were at a point where I couldn't even look at her phone without feeling a twinge of doubt. Every time she laughed at a message or paused to reply to a work email, I wondered if it was him. I hated that I felt like this, but I couldn't help it. It was like the seed of doubt had been planted, and now it was growing. The worst part was that I couldn't even talk to her about it anymore. She tried to get closer, tried to reassure me, but it wasn't enough. The damage had already been done. I needed more than just her words. I needed actions. I needed proof that I wasn't being the irrational one in all of this. That's when the invitation came. Another office event. Another casual hangout with her coworkers. The last time had been uncomfortable, but I agreed to go again. Maybe I was hoping that this time would be different, that Lila would handle things better. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Luke would be there, lurking in the background. The night of the event, I wasn't surprised to see him. He was already there, talking to a few other people, but the second Lila arrived, his eyes locked onto her. She smiled, gave him a quick wave, and walked over to him. I could feel the unease settle in my stomach. It was like this invisible tug-of-war between us. Her wanting to be friendly, me wanting to protect her from someone who clearly didn't respect boundaries. I didn't want to be the jealous guy. I didn't want to ruin the night for her. But the sight of them together again, I couldn't ignore it. I watched them for a few minutes. Luke was leaning in close, saying something with that same smirk that made my blood boil. Lila was laughing, but it didn't seem like a real laugh. It felt forced, like she was trying to keep things light. And that's when I saw it. Luke's hand brushed against her arm, just like before, but this time it lingered longer than it should have. I could see the discomfort in Lila's face, but she didn't pull away. That small gesture sent a shock through me, like someone had just punched me in the gut. I had enough. I walked over to them, my steps purposeful, my heart pounding. This was it. This had to stop. As I reached them, Luke flashed that same cocky grin at me, like he thought this was some kind of game. "Hey, man, good to see you," he said, like nothing was wrong. Like he wasn't clearly crossing a line. But I wasn't playing along this time. "Cut the crap, Luke," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I don't want to see you touch my wife again. Ever." Lila's face flushed, her eyes wide with shock. She started to say something, but I raised a hand to stop her. "Lila, don't," I said, turning to her. "I'm doing this for us. I won't stand by and let him do whatever he wants." Luke looked between us, a flicker of annoyance flashing across his face. "Whoa, man, chill out," he said, holding his hands up like he was the victim. "I'm just being friendly." "No," I said, my voice low, "you're not. You're crossing the line, and I'm not going to let it happen again." There was a moment of silence. The room seemed to freeze, everyone watching us. Luke finally backed off, muttering something under his breath as he walked away. I stood there for a second, trying to calm my racing heart. I'd done it. I'd finally put a stop to it. But it felt empty, like something had been shattered between Lila and me, and no matter what I did, I couldn't fix it. Lila turned to me, her eyes filled with confusion. "Cole, what the hell is going on? Why did you just do that?" "I did it because I care about you," I said, my voice more vulnerable than I intended. "I won't stand by while he makes you feel like you're up for grabs. That's not happening." She shook her head, frustration creeping into her voice. "But you didn't have to make a scene. This is just his way, it's how he is. I can handle it." "You're not hearing me," I snapped, my anger rising again. "It's not about how he is. It's about you letting him get away with it. You're my wife, Lila, and I won't sit back and watch some guy disrespect you like that." The words hit her harder than I expected. She looked down, like she was searching for something to say, but couldn't find the words. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she looked up at me, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "I didn't want to make things worse," she said quietly. "I didn't want you to think I was encouraging it. I really didn't. I just need to know you're with me on this," I said, trying to soften my tone. "I need to know that I'm not overreacting, that this is real to you too." She nodded slowly, though it was clear she didn't fully understand. The doubt in her eyes lingered. I could see it, the realization that maybe this wasn't just about Luke. Maybe it was about us, and the way we'd both handled things. I didn't know where we went from here, but I knew one thing. I couldn't keep questioning everything. I needed to trust her again. And somehow, I didn't know if I could. It was the longest night of my life. After confronting Luke, I felt like I had put my foot down, but the silence between Lila and me was unbearable. The doubt in my mind still gnawed at me, and I wasn't sure how to fix the cracks in our relationship. I kept asking myself if I'd done the right thing. Was I really protecting her? Or was I just letting my insecurities dictate my actions? The next few days were tense. Lila didn't bring up the confrontation again, and I could tell she was trying to move on, but I wasn't sure I could. I still couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. There was an unspoken distance between us, and every time she went to work, I felt that familiar knot in my stomach. But then something changed. One evening, Lila came home early from work. She walked in, her face pale, looking like she had just been through a storm. My first instinct was to ask if she was okay, but when she saw me, she stopped dead in her tracks. "Cole," she said, her voice shaking. "We need to talk." I could tell by the look on her face that something serious had happened. My heart raced, and I immediately assumed the worst. "What happened?" I asked, standing up. Lila looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "It's about Luke." My stomach dropped. I knew it. I'd been right all along. She was involved with him somehow, and now she was going to tell me everything. "Is he still bothering you?" I asked, my voice steady, though my insides were churning. She shook her head, her eyes filled with emotion. "No, Cole, it's not what you think." I felt my chest tighten as she continued. He got what was coming to him today. I was going to keep quiet about it, but now I think you need to know the truth." I could feel a wave of confusion wash over me. "What are you talking about?" I asked, stepping closer. Lila sighed deeply. "After everything that happened, I tried to avoid him. I didn't want to make things worse. But today, he crossed the line with another woman in the office. He was so bold about it, so blatant. He thought he could charm his way out of anything, but the rest of the team saw it too. They called him out." My heart skipped a beat. "So what happened?" She looked down, shaking her head. "He lost his job. The company can't tolerate that kind of behavior. His little games caught up with him, and today, they fired him." For a moment, I just stood there, trying to process what she was saying. Part of me felt vindicated, like justice had been served. But another part of me wondered how much Lila had known all along. Was she just now realizing how inappropriate his behavior had been? Or had she been ignoring it, not wanting to face the truth? "I'm sorry, Cole," Lila said, her voice breaking. "I should have told you sooner. I should have stopped him. I should have done more to protect us." I was silent for a moment. This wasn't the outcome I had imagined. But in some strange way, it felt right. Lila was finally seeing things for what they were. She was taking responsibility for her part in it. And that gave me hope. "You don't need to apologize," I said, my voice softening. "I just need to know you're with me. That you understand why I was so upset. You didn't deserve that from him. And I didn't deserve to feel like I wasn't enough." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I get it now, Cole. I truly do. I won't let anyone make me feel like that again. You're the one I want by my side." And with that, something in me finally snapped back into place. The weight that had been hanging over me for weeks lifted. It wasn't about Luke anymore. It was about Lila and me, about rebuilding what had been broken. The next few weeks were a process. We talked more openly, and I could feel our relationship strengthening again. She became more aware of her boundaries, and I started to trust her again. The doubts that had lingered in the back of my mind slowly faded as we grew closer. In the end, I realized something important. I didn't need to fight for her trust. I just needed to trust myself and trust that I knew what was right for us. The confrontation with Luke, the jealousy, and the pain, it was all part of the journey. It had pushed us to a place of honesty, and that was something we couldn't take for granted. As for Luke, well, karma had its way. He learned the hard way that no one could get away with playing games when there were real consequences. His charm wasn't enough to save him from the truth, and that truth came crashing down on him when his actions caught up with him. And as for me, I walked away with a stronger relationship, a deeper understanding of trust, and a renewed sense of commitment. Sometimes, life pushes you to the edge, but in the end, it's the strength of your bond that holds everything together. Please like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. I read them all,